Hi everyone. For this week's application, I chose to watch the documentary Lowland Kids, and this was a short film telling the story of America's first climate refugees, from the Ile de Jean Charles in Louisiana. I would give this film a rating of like a 7 out of 10 because it did a great job highlighting the story of one family, but it didn't go into too much detail on the science and the data behind climate change and why these families are having to leave. However, I did find the storytelling to be super compelling and it really paid to the pathos of the viewer. So to answer the first question, this film focused on sea level rise and the displacement of communities associated with high tides and storm surge due to climate change. The Ile de Jean Charles is a small strip of land off the coast of Louisiana, which is highly susceptible to flooding during extreme weather events. And scientists predict that in a few years it will be an unlivable and an unrecognizable area. So many of the people who have lived there for generations are being forced to leave due to climate change. The coastal landscapes such as this island are highly dynamic and heterogeneous due to fluvial movements, which has a profound impact on the landscape's ecology. And the flora and the fauna that were once enjoyed in this area are also forced to refuge into new habitats, and this was discussed briefly in the film. Um, Next, the film focused on a single family within the Ile de Jean Charles community, which is home to Native Americans. And this community lives on the bayou surrounded by water and a coastal landscape. The film, as I already mentioned, focuses less on data and the science of climate change and more how it impacts the community by storytelling. So they did not really detail the spatial or temporal scales associated with climate change, but they did emphasize the urgency of a timely relocation due to these intense hurricanes and sea level rise. And I found the film very emotionally compelling, but it did not detail any of like the next steps on how an everyday citizen can contribute. And it wasn't super informative on what climate change is and the general impacts. So I think that the director probably expected the viewer to come in with some sort of background knowledge on what sea level rise is and what a climate refugee is before watching. So I would say that the intended audience could be anyone who's looking to hear a story, but it's likely someone who is familiar with climate change and who wants to hear more of a personal story associated with it. Um, I found that the emotional grasp that storytelling has can really inspire like more of a willingness for action rather than just hearing the data. So I do think that this was like a really good film if you do have some background on climate change. And if I were to change anything, I would probably add more background information on climate change data and show more visuals on the devastation that has and could occur with predicted sea level rise scenarios. I would also consider adding the accounts of a few more families or community members who will also become climate refugees. And I think that these changes would create an even more compelling piece.